I was once caught by my stepmother watching adult movies with my laptop, and the most surprising thing was she didn't get angry, didn't scold. She just closed the door, and that night she taught me something that no one had ever taught me in my 19 years as a son. Hi, I'm Ethan, I'm 21, and I want to tell you about a summer that I'll never forget. That summer I really grew up, not just in age, but in how I saw myself, and how I saw a woman so mean. I didn't call mom when I was a kid my biological mother. And father split up. I lived with my mother until I was 15, then moved back in with my father in Austin, Texas. That's when Elena, the woman he married later, came into my life. I didn't hate her, but I wasn't friendly with her. I kept my distance. I called her Elena, never mom. She didn't push, she didn't complain. She just smiled and said, "Whenever you're ready, I'm here." I kept quiet. I kept my heart closed, and I kept that attitude aside for 4 years. At 19, after my freshman year in Boston, I moved back home, not because I missed my family, but because I needed a place to breathe. I had suffered a blow to my self-esteem without anyone knowing. I broke up with my girlfriend Hannah. She was the first person I had ever truly loved, and the first person who made me feel inadequate. That day, after an unpleasant intim massage, looked at me, not angry, not sulking, but just sighed. I need a real man, not some boy who learned about porn. And then tried to guess my feelings. I was speechless. I couldn't say anything. It just felt like after the breakup I tried to study. You get the idea. I threw myself into watching adult movies, not because of desire, but because of panic. I was afraid. I didn't know anything. Afraid of disappointing someone again. Afraid of not being good enough in the things that all men are judged for. I hid my laptop. I hid my headphones. I hid my true feelings. My father was busy working all summer. Elena still lived quietly, gently working at the gallery, and then coming home to cook and take care of the house. One afternoon I thought I was home alone. Elena said she was going to meet a friend. I took the opportunity to open my laptop. I didn't check my headphones carefully. The movie sound was clear, not loud, but enough for others to hear. The moans and heavy breathing coming from the laptop while I was paying attention. The door to the room opened. It was Elena standing there. The light from the hallway shone in. She looked at me, not panicking, not screaming, just looking. Then she said, her voice even, "You should close the door more carefully, Ethan." Then she closed the door. No scolding, no angry expression, just silence. It broke me. I felt like I had been stripped naked in front of someone I had always tried to keep at a distance. I didn't dare leave my room that night. I didn't dare look at her. I thought she would tell my dad. I thought there would be some heavy conversation, like, "Son, I'm so disappointed." But nothing happened, just a tray of food left at the door. No knock, no note, and a strange feeling came over me. Why didn't she say anything? Why did I feel grateful that night? I didn't eat, didn't sleep. I just lay there in theater staring at the ceiling. My chest felt heavy as a rock. I never thought I would talk to my stepmother about sex, but maybe she was the only one who listened to me without judgment. The next morning I walked out of the room like a shadow. I was prepared for an awkward morning, or at least an awkward look, but no, Elena was the same as always. Still cleaning the kitchen, still cooking breakfast, still wearing the same loose white shirt and neatly tying her hair. Only one thing was different. She looked at me gently and said, "Sit down, the eggs are getting cold." I hesitated. I didn't know whether to pretend nothing was wrong or apologize. In the end, I just sat down, silence, until she placed a glass of orange juice in front of me and said, "Ethan, I don't mean to embarrass you, but if you're learning important things about your body and your emotions, I think you deserve to learn the right way." I didn't answer right away, partly because I was embarrassed, partly because for the first time I heard someone talk about it without embarrassment or joking. "You don't have to say anything," she continued. "I learned wrong too, and paid for it with years of pain." I looked up surprised. Elena, the woman I always saw as calm and elegant, had been hurt by things I was struggling with. "I got married very young," she said. "I didn't understand my body, and he didn't understand me. It was like an obligation. Sometimes it was painful, but I thought I had to endure it, because that's what women have to do to keep their husbands." She was silent for a moment. Then she exhaled as if a burden had been lifted. It was only later that I understood no one can touch me if they don't care about my feelings. I swallowed hard, my throat tightened. I'd never heard anyone talk about sex that way. No technique, no boasting, just connection, respect, understanding. Elena looked at me. Her eyes weren't lecturing, not pitying. Just an adult trying to help a young person not get lost. If you want, she said, we could watch a video together. Not to teach you how, but to show you what's fake, what's real, and why most of what you watch will make you worse, not better. I nodded, feeling empty that evening. Is that with Elena on the sofa, one end of the remote control with us. We picked a short video. She paused over several, explained, pointed out the unreality, the camera angles, the sounds, the reactions that weren't real. Real people don't look at each other like this, she pointed out, and women don't feel connected just by looking at their bodies. I listened. She showed me how to have happy moments with my partner, even showing me the points on a woman's body that needed attention for great foreplay. She spoke and described her body as she spoke, giving me the most objective and understandable view. At that moment, I felt she was beautiful. At 45, her body was so attractive. And for the first time, I felt like I was no longer a bad son who had been criticized for being in bed, but someone who would learning again in a more proper way. After that evening, I no longer felt ashamed to look Elena in the eye. I felt grateful. She did what every adult should do when a child enters adulthood. Listen and lead the way. I went to bed that night for the first time in months, feeling light, and in my head there was only one sentence repeating. Someone who truly loves you won't need you to be good. They need you to understand. From that day on, there was something very different between me and Elena. Not a change that could be named, not a new feeling, but a new layer of air, lighter but also deeper. She didn't act differently. She was still the woman who quietly cleaned the kitchen, arranged flowers, poured orange juice in the morning. But to me, her every gesture had a new meaning, silent kindness. I started to pay more attention. The way she left the crispiest fried egg for me. The way she didn't ask too many questions, but always left the kitchen door open when I passed by. No one said anything, but inside me a series of questions gradually appeared. Why did she want to help me? Why didn't she feel awkward, but felt safe? How much had she been hurt to understand that clearly? One afternoon, when my father called me on Zoom, I sat down to dinner with Elena. She answered the phone, talked for a few minutes, smiled properly, but somehow distantly. When I hung up, I blurted out, "Are you happy?" She paused for a second, put down her glass of water. "Are you asking out of curiosity, or because Mom doesn't seem like a happy person?" I wailed, then nodded very slightly. "Because I guess so." She smiled softly. "There are people who choose peace over emotion. My father is one of those people." Elena never said anything bad about my father, but I understood what she didn't say. I had never seen my father hug her from behind, never heard him call her sister instead of Elena. She was always present, always attentive, always gentle, and Kind was always like a temporary resident of this house. That night I lay in bed, my mind reeling. I wondered, was I too close to her, not in terms of physical distance, but something even more dangerous, spiritual distance. The next day I happened to find an old book in the small library in the living room. The Body Keeps the Score, a book about psychological trauma and the body. Inside of there were notes in purple ink, Elena's handwriting. Women are not taught to say no. Some touch themselves to love, some touch themselves to erase themselves. Silence is not forgiveness. I paused. Those lines were not written to share, but she had written them, like someone who had to draw blood to keep from suffocating. I put the book back. I said nothing to her, but my heart shook because I understood Elena had been hurt. It hurts. And instead of letting the wound fester, she chose to help others, not make the same mistake. I thought she was just helping me because she was a kind person, but it turns out she was helping me as well as healing herself. After that first conversation, Elena and I never mentioned it again. There was no need. Every time I walked into the kitchen and saw her cooking in the afternoon light coming through the window, I no longer felt as distant as before. There was an invisible thread connecting us, something not of blood, not of responsibility, but of empathy between two people who had gone through the feeling of being left behind. One evening it was raining heavily. I was sitting reading some notes from the previous semester when the power went out. Elena called me to the kitchen. She lit a candle and placed it in the middle of the dining table, as if she were setting up a peaceful evening in the middle of a storm. If the power goes out, let's eat early, she said, placing 2 bowls of noodles in front of me. We ate in candlelight, the sound of rain falling steadily on the porch. No one said anything for a long time. Then she suddenly asked, "Have you ever loved someone without any proof?" That question made me pause. I looked at her, wondering what she was thinking. She smiled as if reading my eyes. "What I mean is sometimes people love just because they see each other, really see each other, not because they are good or perfect." I fell silent, remembering Hannah, remembering the feeling of being compared, judged, reduced to a failure. It shook my head slightly. I don't think ever Elena looked out the window. I loved like that when I was very young, but I let people define me, my body, my emotions, my values. I didn't say it, but every time I was criticized, hurt, I believed I deserved it. I looked into her eyes then, no longer as a stepmother, but as a real woman, weak, hurt, but not broken. She said that after her first marriage, she spent years not daring to touch anyone. Just hearing a man laugh loudly made her heart ache. It wasn't until she met my father, who was calm, reserved, but not really open, that she chose to live with someone by her side. "It's not love," she said. "It's just a sense of security, comfortable though, sometimes a little empty." I didn't know what to say. I just felt my heart soften, as if I understood a part of the old secret of this house. I also understood why Elena never blamed me, even though I used to be cold. Used to consider her redundant, because she knew what it was like to be rejected, and instead of responding, she chose another way, gentleness. That night when I went upstairs, I didn't open my laptop. I sat down and wrote on a small piece of paper, "Thank you for not turning your back." I folded it up and slipped it into the slot of the book. "The body keeps the score," the one she had taken notes on. I didn't intend for her to read it. I just wanted to leave it there as a way to acknowledge that I was changing. Gone was Ethan of last spring, the quiet, self-conscious, pretending to be okay. The next morning, Elena said nothing about the book, but when I went down to the kitchen, I saw a glass of orange juice sitting neatly next to my notebook. Beneath the glass there was a small piece of paper with just 4 words written on it. "Mom is always here." That summer passed like that, slow, quiet, but not boring. Every day Elena and I had something more to share, even if it was just a small story or a quiet moment together. I started to leave the room more, reading books in the living room, drinking tea with her in the backyard. One day we went to the supermarket together. People looked at us as mother and daughter, or as 2 close people, without anyone questioning. I no longer saw her as Dad's wife. I saw her as herself, Elena, a woman I had never tried to understand until now. That day, the weather was unusually cool. Elena invited me to the back porch, where she often sat reading books on peaceful afternoons. I brought 2 cups of coffee. She brought a thin blanket and an old photo album. She put the album down on the wooden table, looked at me for a moment, then asked, "Have you ever wondered who I was before I met your father?" I nodded honestly, "Yes. But I think maybe I don't have the right to ask." She smiled, not a polite smile, but a smile of acceptance. "It's true that I never told you because I thought if someone really wanted to know, they would listen." I sat still, watching her flip through the first page of the album. An old wedding photo appeared. She was wearing a white dress, her eyes downcast, her lips pressed tightly together. There was no happiness in her eyes. "This is my first marriage. I'm only 23. I looked at the man in the photo, tall, with a commanding presence. His eyes were possessive. Not loving. Elena didn't look at the photo. She just stared straight at front yard, where sunlight was filtering through the trees. I loved him. I thought then love is acceptance. It's patience. It's doing everything the other person needs, even when you don't want to. He was almost 15 years older than me. Successful, or rather in control of everything, including me. I said nothing, I just listened. I didn't know anything about sex when I got married. I didn't have anyone to tell me the right things. All I knew was every time we were intimate, I felt like I was disappearing. She paused for a moment, then continued, sometimes. I thought maybe everyone is like that. Maybe the feeling of emptiness, pain, and resignation is part of love. I convinced myself that for 3 years I didn't know where to put my hands, didn't know where to look, but I still listened at each word pressed against my chest. He never hit me, but every time he touched me, I felt like a part of me was being taken away legally, and sadly, I didn't have the language to fight back. I just kept quiet, and the more silent I was, the more I believed I was the problem. I bowed my head, clenched my fists, and my heart was in turmoil. Partly because I was angry for her, partly because I realized that there were pains that were never revealed to the outside world until people believed them enough to tell them. Elena turned to look at me. There were no tears in her eyes. There was only the stillness of someone who had walked through a storm without waiting for anyone to save her. I only came out when I started writing. I wrote all the things I didn't dare say every night after he fell asleep. And one day I read what I wrote. I saw if I stayed, I would die, not physically but inside. She didn't say divorce. She didn't use the word release. It was simply leaving. Elena flipped through the album. There were pictures of her sitting alone in the kitchen, her face tilted toward the window, the pale light falling on her hands. No one beside her, no smile, no hand to hold. I thought I would never love anyone again. It wasn't because I was afraid of men. It was because I didn't know what else to love. But then I met your father, a quiet man, not loud, not intrusive. He gave me space, and in that silence I was Alouette Heel. I asked, so do you love your father? She smiled a little sadly this time. I'm not sure it was love, but I'm grateful, thankful that he didn't force me to love again. I understood that feeling. There are people who don't save us, don't fix us, but they stand still until we're strong enough to stand up for ourselves. Elena continued, but your father doesn't really want to understand. He's a good person, but he doesn't know how to listen, especially when it comes to things that are too delicate. I thought about family meals. My father often flipped through the newspaper while eating. He rarely asked questions. When something happened, he just said, it'll pass. Elena leaned back in her chair, looking up at the sky. The wind blew gently through her hair. She gently touched the wedding ring on her hand. I don't blame him, but sometimes I feel I'm still living alone. There are enough people in the house, but no one really sees each other. I was silent for a long time. Finally, I asked a question that surprised me because I dared to ask, so why did you help me? Elena looked at me. Her eyes were gentle but straightforward. Because you're the only one who ever asked me if I was happy. I was stunned. I didn't know what to say. She continued, her voice slow, because I don't want you to go down the wrong path and then have to learn how to love a lover again like me. Because I know the feeling of being judged as not good now. It eats into people's hearts longer than a breakup, and because I see in you something that many adults have lost the courage to admit that they don't know. Elena stood up, closed the album, and hugged it to her chest as if hugging a part of her memory. Before entering the house, she turned back. You didn't have to be perfect. Just don't be insensitive. That night, I couldn't sleep, not because I was worried, but because I felt light in a way that for the first time in my life I didn't feel ashamed when I looked in the mirror. I didn't feel weak because I had been criticized. I felt like I was growing, not with muscles or flattery, but with understanding others, and understand a woman who has been in a lot of pain, but still chooses to be gentle. I didn't know since when Elena's presence no longer makes me feel shy. It's no longer the feeling of living with a stepmother, but a presence gentle, comfortable, sometimes making me forget that there was a distance between us. She didn't try to be close. She was just there in the way of someone who knows that sometimes silence is more necessary than words. But that made me feel more and more open. We shared more, not by things. One day, it was just about the soup she used to cook with the wrong salt ratio when she first married my father. Another day, it was about her fear of cockroaches, but she never screamed at Becky's. Grown women don't scream in front of their children. And then there were nights when we sat quietly on the porch, each with a cup of tea. No one said anything, but it still felt like we were chatting. One afternoon, I saw Elena standing on a chair in The kitchen trying to get the spice jar on the high shelf. I was close, and I stepped forward reflexively. But that moment, so natural, so unprepared, was the turning point. "Let me get it," I said and stepped up behind her. At that moment her foot slipped. The chair wobbled. She lost her balance. I reached out to catch it, but I couldn't catch it. In an instant her whole body fell toward me. We fell to the kitchen floor. The fall wasn't hard, but it wasn't to stop us both. I was on my back, Elena on her side, her head almost touching my chest. It all lasted only a few seconds, but they were the longest seconds I'd ever felt. I heard her breathing, so close. One hand was still holding her back as if I hadn't let go it, afraid she'd hurt me. Her eyes widened. Not in shock, but in surprise. We looked at each other. Neither of us said anything. I quickly jumped up, helping her sit up. The atmosphere was strange. Lightens. I straightened up, took a step back, and fumbled. "I'm sorry. I didn't expect you to lose your balance so quickly." Elena nodded slightly, brushed off her skirt, and smiled as gently as ever. "It's okay. I didn't fall on anything important." I laughed, because that light joke eased awkward silence. But after she turned back to the pot of soup boiling on the stove, I stood there for a few seconds. Something very small had changed. Not feelings, but a new awareness. The closeness between two people could happen at any time in a completely unexpected way. I wasn't embarrassed by the fall, but I was afraid. Not of Elena, but of myself, afraid of that intimacy happening again, not by accident, but in my head. I didn't want to cross the line, but the line was no longer a wall. It's like a thin wire. One wrong breath is enough to make one miss a step. After that fall, I started to be cautious. Not exactly avoiding her, but I realized that I was approaching a thin line, as where my feelings were no longer as pure as before. I started to notice every little detail, the gentle scent of her hair every time she walked by, the way her sleeves rolled up when washing the dishes to reveal her thin wrists, the way she smiled slightly when reading a certain passage. All of it made me feel that she was too real, too close, and no longer Dad's wife. That was what made me feel scared. I started to keep my distance, even slightly, not stopping for long in the kitchen when she was cooking, not touching when handing something, not looking straight at her when she said things that made me feel vulnerable. But what I didn't expect was that she started to do the same. Elena, who was always there to ask me a question after every meal, suddenly became more reserved. She rarely spoke. She rarely stopped by the living room while I was sitting. One day I came down late. Breakfast was already in the basket, and she disappeared into the gallery early. I don't know who started it first. Maybe it was me, maybe it was her, or maybe we both realized at the same time that between us, some invisible closeness was forming, and we were both afraid it would go too far. One evening while I was reading in my room, there was a very gentle knock on the door. I went out and saw Elena standing in the hallway, holding a thick cloth-covered book. The yellow light fell on her face, something different than usual. She handed me the book, saying softly, "I think this is good. It's about emotions live in the body. If you like it, keep it." I took it, nodded, said nothing. There were so many things I wanted to say, that I was grateful, that I felt guilty, that I wished she wouldn't go any further in the distance, but and I just stood still. Elena looked at me for a moment, then said slowly, "We're understanding each other, but we are also afraid of it. Do you see that?" I took a deep breath, then nodded, shedding blame. She wasn't sad. She just said softly, "It's okay. Intimacy also takes time to stand firm, especially when you don't know what to call it." That night I lay down reading the book she gave me. On the first page was a familiar purple note. "Emotions don't need to be analyzed. They just need to be acknowledged." I read that line over and over again, and I realized I was still learning, not learning to be a man, but learning to be a person, knowing how to recognize when I was moved, and knowing how to stop before I lost my way. And Elena, she never taught me anything in a lecture-like way, but through her silence, gentleness, and caution I learned a great lesson. Sometimes keeping distance is the kindest thing two people can do for each other. I used to think that the only thing that made me feel unsteady was my old guilt, what Hannah had said, how I saw myself as inadequate, but I was wrong. It turns out that emotions can come from things I never thought I would find important. One day early in the week, I woke up later than usual. As I washed my face under the cool water, I heard laughter coming from the living room, a man's voice, strange, but not strange enough to be distant. I walked downstairs and saw Elena standing next to a man in his 50s. He was neatly dressed in a shirt with graying hair, and he smiled slightly as he handed her a leather-bound book. Feminine sunlight was slanting, making his face even more calm. "Elena, thank you for holding the painting for me the other day," he said, his voice low and clear. Elena smiled, a comfortable smile different from the gentle one she usually had at home with me. "Richard, don't be so formal. I knew you wanted it when you first walked into the gallery." They talked for a while longer. Then Elena turned to me. "Oh, Ethan, this is Uncle Richard, a regular at Mom's gallery." I nodded. Richard shook my hand firmly, just enough. He looked at me as if he had heard a lot about me before. I wasn't sure. I liked the look. Richard left shortly after, but the rest of the atmosphere in the house changed. Not unpleasant exactly, but strange. Elena didn't notice, or pretended not to notice it, that I was watching her. She was wearing a simple black dress, but for the first time, I noticed that she was wearing a light layer of eyeliner. Not much, just a thin line, but enough for me to know that she had prepared it. During breakfast that morning, I didn't ask anything, but there was a strange feeling in my heart. It had no name, no shape, and was not easy to admit. That afternoon, I found her arranging some picture frames in the small gallery behind the house. I walked in pretending to ask about an old oil painting, but what I really wanted to ask was, "How long have you known Uncle Richard?" Elena looked at me, her eyes softening. "About 2 years. He's a nice guy, educated, polite." I nodded, but then I blurted out, "Do you like him?" She wasn't surprised. She didn't dodge. She just tilted her head a little. I never thought about it, but today he asked me out for a drink. I didn't know why my chest felt heavy. I wasn't her biological child. I had no right to react, but part of me felt unsteady. "And did you say yes?" Elena looked straight at me for the first time during that conversation. Her voice was calm, but I could see the consideration in her eyes. I'm still thinking that night I didn't eat dinner with Elena. I said I needed to review old documents. Actually, I just sat there staring at my laptop screen, my mind blank. I didn't understand myself. I had no right to be jealous. I wasn't her lover. I wasn't her blood. I was just a 19-year-old boy who quietly let out of the dark, without asking for anything in return. But that feeling, the feeling of seeing Samia Niels invite her out for a drink, and she didn't refuse right away, was like a scissor cutting off something verifragile inside me. I lay on the bed remembering the way she smiled when she stood next to Richard. A smile with light, a smile I had never seen when she talked to my father, and I realized maybe it was Beccaus. I had never seen her truly happy, so when I saw that flash I felt scared. Scared of what? Scared that she would leave my world, afraid that she would give that gentleness to someone else, or afraid that I would no longer be someone special. The next morning Elena acted as usual. She left breakfast ready, then went for an early walk. But I saw on the kitchen table a white rose in a small glass vase. No card, no explanation, but I knew it was from Richard. I tried to act normal all day, but Elena noticed when I was picking up books in the living room. She gently came over and asked, "What's wrong?" I shook my head. "It's okay." She was silent for a moment, then said, "If you have anything to say, I'm still listening." I blurted out without thinking, "Are you really going with him?" Elena looked at me. This time she leaned slightly towards me. Her voice wasn't as gentle as usual, but frankly mature, without evasion. "If I leave, how will you feel?" I was speechless, unable to answer. She nodded slightly. It seemed that my silence was the answer. "Ethan, I know your feelings are complicated, and I know there are things we don't say, but they still exist between us. But it's not your fault, and it's not mine either. We're just learning to be close, at a safe distance." I looked at her. My eyes stung, but I didn't cry. "I don't want to lose you." Elena stepped closer, gently placing her hand on my shoulder. Her gaze softened as it always did, but this time there was more determination. "You won't lose me, but you need to know I'm a woman, not just a stepmother, not just a mentor. I need to be seen as a person with feelings too." She withdrew her hand, no hug, no attempt to lighten the mood. Shuttered just one last sentence before going upstairs. We have been together on important days, but there are journeys that each of us must continue alone, alone. I sat on the steps, the early summer sun slanting over my shoulders, my heart empty. But in that time something had just been laid down like a truth I was forced to accept. Elena didn't belong to me, but she had been the only one by my side when I had nothing. I met Claire late in the summer. It was a late morning. The sun was shining brightly. I stopped by a coffee shop near my old school to pick up a book recommended by the public library. Claire was standing at the counter intently reading the back cover, her blonde hair pulled back, her white shirt sleeves rolled up, and her brown eyes as warm as chocolate. I hadn't intended to strike up a conversation, but she did. "You read me brown too?" I looked up a little surprised. She smiled, still holding the book. Courage is vulnerability. Right, hard to believe young men would pick that up. I smiled, and somehow we started talking naturally, unforced. Claire was majoring in education, wanting to be a middle school teacher. She loved books, loved children, and loved untold stories. I didn't say much about myself, but she didn't press. She just listened, and that strangely made me want to say more. We texted after that. We met a few times, went for walks. We drank tea, we laughed about little things, and I realized for the first time since Hannah I didn't see myself as the one who needed fixing. Claire didn't look at me with eyes waiting for me to prove something. She just looked, and looked very real, as if in my slow, still learning version was valuable enough for her to want to be around. One rainy afternoon, as we sat in me living room, soft music playing from the small speakers, Claire turned to me and asked, "I know it might be a little personal, but have you ever loved someone? I mean loved without trying to be someone else?" I was stunned, then I nodded slightly once. Not in the way people usually think, but being listened to all the way through. She didn't ask any more questions. She just took my hand and squeezed it gently. I didn't say Elena's name, but I knew in my heart that Claire wouldn't judge me if I did. We grew closer after that day. No rush, no urgency, but there was a growing trust, as natural as the way the sky softens after an early autumn rain. And then it happened, like something that didn't need to be planned. One evening Claire stayed late. She fell asleep on the sofa. I covered her with a blanket, then sat next to her watching her sleep, her face peaceful, her lips slightly parted. When she woke up it was late. The only light in the room was a small one on the corner of the table. She looked at me and whispered, "I think I want to stay if you want me to." I didn't answer right away because my heart started beating fast. Not because of desire, but because of fear. Fear of failing again. Fear of doing wrong. Fear of being compared. Claire saw that she didn't rush me. Not sad, she just asked, "What are you afraid of?" I sighed, was silent for a moment, then said honestly, softly, like a confession, "Afraid of disappointing you?" Claire didn't react the way I thought she would. She wasn't angry. She wasn't disappointed. She didn't say I was weak. She just looked at me silently for a moment, then said softly, "I don't need you to prove anything. I just need you to really be here." I looked up, looked into her eyes, and for the first time in my life I felt I didn't need to act. No need to rush. No need to follow any common denominator. Just breathe and touch each other with a gentleness that I thought I didn't have. Claire pulled me closer. We didn't rush into each other like in the movies. No gasps, no dim lights, no background music. Just two people learning to trust each other with their skin, with their eyes, with their warmth, with all the things that were never taught properly. Everything wasn't perfect. Sometimes I was confused. Sometimes we both laughed at a silly detail. But that's what made me feel real. Unlike the first time with Hannah, where I was just a practicer. Unlike the movies, where everything was exaggerated to the point of being emotionless. That night, I didn't become the man society expected me to be. I became the man I could be proud of. Knowing how to listen, knowing how to slow down, knowing how to say, "I'm not sure," but still choosing to stay and find a way together. After we were done, we lay together, her hand in mine, breathing evenly. Claire rested her head on my chest, whispering, "I think I love the way you took me, like I'm not a body, but someone to be understood." I didn't answer, he just smiled, squeezing her hand a little more gently. A familiar voice rang in my head, Elena's voice from that night in the kitchen. People who love you don't need you to be good. They need you to be real. I closed my eyes for the first time. No fear, no comparison, no hiding. For myself, and I knew I had come a long way, not to become someone else, but to return to myself, a kinder, more whole person. Near the end of August, I brought Claire home. It was a sunny Sunday, not too hot. The wind was light, just enough to make the curtains flutter when Elena opened the door to greet us. Claire carried a bouquet of lavender. I was in a strange mood, not exactly nervous, but not entirely calm either. Elena stood in theater way, the light behind her making her look like she had stepped out of an early morning painting. She was wearing a dark blue dress, her hair was pulled back into a bun, and her smile as gentle as the first time I had walked into the kitchen that morning when she had said, "Mommy's always here." "Hello," she said to me, then turned to Claire. "And hello, daughter, I'm Elena." Claire smiled, holding out the bouquet. "Please don't call me daughter. I'm still nervous when I meet adults." All three of us laughed. The atmosphere lightened. We entered the house. Elena had prepared a surprisingly beautiful table. No ostentation, no frills, but everything was meticulous, crispy. Lasagna salad with oil and vinegar, an open bottle of red wine, and the hand-embroidered white tablecloth that I had seen her keep so carefully. Claire tilted her head slightly when she saw the table. "You cooked. I feel like I've stepped into a movie." Elena smiled. "Been a long time since Mom prepared a meal for someone important." I looked over, and the moment my eyes met hers, I knew she wasn't just talking about Claire. Throughout the meal, Elena didn't ask any serious questions. She let the two of us talk about school, the silly things we did on campus, the picnics that didn't work out because of the rain. Claire told us in an innocent voice, occasionally turning to look at me and smiling, and for the first time, I felt completely defenseless. I didn't worry about being judged. I didn't worry about being compared. I didn't worry about whether I was doing it right, because right here at this meal I was me, true and sufficient. Elena did not interfere much. She just listened, but sometimes I saw her looking at me. A quiet, deep, and slightly sad look. Not sad because of loss, but sad like Simeon standing from afar, seeing the person she once supported, now old enough to move on. The meal passed like a silent song. No climax, no innovation, but steady and full of warmth. I had never seen Elena so calm, and I had never felt so peaceful when introducing a girl to her until Claire, in a moment, without any calculation, said something very natural. "I think Ethan grew up so well. He must have had a woman who really understood him." I was stunned. Claire still smiled innocently, looking at me. "I mean, not just a biological mother or anything, but a woman gentle enough to make men not have to struggle when they grow up." I turned to Elena. She looked at me, didn't say anything, didn't smile. Just nodded slightly, very slightly, as if accepting but the sentence and the silence that had just fallen on the table. I swallowed, my heart clenched. Claire didn't know she had just said something that touched the very core of what Elena and I had tried to keep quiet, a truth that no one intended to say, no one intended to touch, but it still existed, like an underground stream at the bottom of a river, flowing quietly. But forever. I bent down, bringing glass to my mouth to hide my confusion. Elena was still looking at me, no blame, no regrets. Just like someone who knew she was on the right path and no. It was time to stop. She poured Claire more wine, then turned to me gently, saying, "Sometimes there are things that need to be named. Just one person who understands is enough." Claire smiled and nodded, not knowing that both people facing her at that moment had just gone through a very special memory. I put my hand on the table, not touching Elena's hand, but placing it close as a way of acknowledging I had grown up, and she was an important part of that journey. No need to repeat, no thanks needed, just a look that closes everything, complete and silent. After dinner, Clary helped Elena clean up. They chatted animatedly, as if they had known each other for a long time. I stood outside watching the late afternoon sunlight cast shadows on the steps. A soft silence fell over me, as if everything from that summer had been neatly folded into a discreet box, stored on the top shelf of my memories. When Claire left, she hugged Elena. For a long time I was so happy to meet you. I understand why Ethan loves you so much. Elena smiled, placing her hand on Claire's back. Thank you for doing something no one can teach you, making Simeon feel enough. I walked Claire to the car. She kissed me lightly on the cheek, whispering, "Today was a beautiful day." I nodded. Yes, more beautiful than expected. When I returned, Elena was washing glasses in the kitchen. She didn't look at me when I walked in, just said softly, "She's good. I saw it in your eyes. You're not afraid anymore." I stood behind her, hands in my pockets, my voice low, because you've been taught the most important thing. Not how to do it right, but how to listen. Elena put down her glass, wiped her hands on a towel, and turned to look at me. We didn't say anything more. I knew she understood. Andy understood. No need to say thank you, no need to hug, no need to recall that summer, where a troubled boy was taught by a woman to look at himself with humility. I turned away, but before I left kitchen, I stopped. I turned back for the last time. That day you said, "Mom is still here." Now I want to say it to you again. Elena paused, then nodded. "And I still believe you will become the person I once wished to meet in my life." The last sunlight of the day shone on her face. No more sadness, no more silence, just a soft light covering the eyes. Thetans looked at me, not as a child nor as a man, but as a soul, once lost and now found its way. And that is how my story ends. No tearful ending, no secrets revealed. Just a summer with a woman who chose to be gentle when the world forced people to be tough. A summer where he learned how to be human again, before learning how to be a man. And now every time I see Claire smile, I know I have gone far, but I will never forget where it started. I never called her mom, but she taught me what no mother ever taught me: how to be a man. To be kind, to listen, and to be calm enough not to hurt others. Thank you for staying with me until the end.